Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and this is my husband Drew. And on this channel, we talk about life and relationships after leaving the church and also provide our commentary on some of the goings on in evangelicalism and conservative Christianity.
Sometimes, like in today's case, I'm here against my will. I'm not looking forward to this at all.
Yeah, today we are back talking about our favorite pastor, Mark Driscoll. He's someone that I've talked about quite a lot on my channel. But just for those that don't know, Mark Driscoll was the pastor of the infamous Mars Hill Church. He actually ended up having to leave that church because he was accused of verbally assaulting multiple staff members. He is now the pastor at a church in Scottsdale, Arizona called Trinity Baptist. And he has not changed his ways at all. If anything, he's probably gotten worse.
Yeah. So what are you subjecting me to today?
We're going to be looking at a clip from a sermon he gave to his men's Bible study. But before we do that, I do briefly want to take us on a little bit of an adventure.
Okay.
I just kind of want to look at Driscoll's recent YouTube videos and titles because I have noticed I keep pretty good tabs on him. For the last few months, his thumbnails and his titles have gotten even more outrageous than they already were. His most recent from 2 hours ago is Satan tormenting you. There's one way to escape. You need to forgive. And it has this AI generated picture of the devil or a demon. A little bit cringe. Jesus is a demon hunter and the gospel is a war story. He's obsessed with war. He loves to paint things in very battle terms.
God, look at that one that says Billy Graham didn't go to seminary, but Joseph Stalin did.
Wait, where is that one? I don't see it.
Over to the right. Should Christians go to college? Do pastors need to go to seminary?
Oh, what? Yeah. Oh, this one is my favorite. Your pastor is a soft man and needs to get punched in the face.
What?
Yeah. I watched, I can't remember what it's about. I did watch this one. The story of Barak and Judges.
Wow, okay.
Are you dating a Jezebel? Hot chicks are bad news if they don't love Jesus.
Are you a worthless man? Shows a man with glasses, a mask, and getting a vaccine.
Yeah, apparently if you're vaccinated, that makes you a worthless man.
I just noticed that you smell especially good today. Can you tell me why?
Well, thank you. That is because of today's sponsor, Scentbird. I'm really excited to be able to partner with Scentbird for this video because I've actually been using their service for a long time now. I'm not exaggerating. This is just some of the Scentbird fragrances that I own. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm obsessed with fragrance, but my secret is I never pay full price for a perfume, and Scentbird is a great way to try different designer brands without having to shell out hundreds of dollars. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription that allows you to choose a new fragrance every month for just $17. They have over 700 fragrances that you can choose from, including high-end brands like Gucci, Prada, or Versace, and they have indie brands like Skylar, Heretic, and Confessions of a Rebel. I've really enjoyed experimenting with different perfumes and figuring out which ones I really jam with, and I know you will too. Every month you'll receive a 30-day supply of your fragrance of choice, and Scentbird also offers flexible plans and allows you to skip a month or cancel your membership at any time. On top of all of this, you can use my coupon code ANTIBOT for 55% off Scentbird, which comes out to just a little over $7 for your first month. In my subscription this month, I received Elixir by Roja, and it came in this really sturdy pink case that goes on your perfume magnetically. The fragrance notes on this perfume are rose, raspberry, peach, and vanilla, and it's a very romantic scent. I think it would be perfect for date nights. And I actually wore this fragrance when Drew and I went out to dinner for Valentine's Day. I also received from the brand Unu Nomad, which I'm probably butchering that name, but this fragrance is nothing but sea and sky. And this one was my absolute favorite this month. The notes are bergamot, sandalwood, and white musk. And this perfume just makes me want to go to the beach. I think it's the perfect summer fragrance. And the last one I received was Love High by Confessions of a Rebel. The notes on this one are peach nectar, nectar, orange flower, jasmine, sandalwood, and apple. And this one's great too. I feel like this one would be really good for date night as well. Thank you so much, Scentbird. Now back to the video.
Check out this one. So this meme here, this Peter Griffin meme, is originally to make a point about racism and how racism is bad. So the original meme is basically if a person is white and they're being pulled over by a cop, like it's okay, they get a pass. Yeah. And if they are any shades darker than peach, then it's not okay. And Driscoll turned this around to say that if you're like Christian, you're okay. But if you're LGBT, if you're trans, you're gay, that's not okay. He's actually using the meme to say that like racism is good. Homophobia is good.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be an anti-racist meme. And he turned it purposely into its opposite.
That's very, very like Driscoll to do something like that. Oh, yeah. This one says, don't let demons raise your kids. And there's an AI demon. And then there's I think a teacher, it looks like, holding a pride flag.
Oh, great.
That's what Driscoll spends the majority of his time talking about, is just like ranting about the LGBT community and trans people and, talking about what real masculinity is. He like spends the majority of his sermons on those topics.
Check out this one. Demons in the Bible are transgender.
Yeah, I think he subscribes to that whole idea that a lot of conservative evangelicals like to say that in the Bible, demons are referred to using like they, them pronouns. Have you not heard that?
That's because there are multiple demons inhabiting a single individual. Like we are legion because there's multiple.
They
it's plural.
Say that's a sign that the LGBT agenda is demonic, because you can see in the Bible that demons refer to themselves using they, them.
That is
and
so
I'm
pathetic.
pretty sure Driscoll subscribes to that idea.
That's such a reach. That's so pathetic.
I know. It's crazy. So yeah, a lot of his thumbnails and titles are just really, really ridiculous. And the one that we're going to be looking at today is not any less ridiculous. It's titled, "Stay-at-home dads are total clowns. God doesn't take them seriously." And the thumbnail, it said, "You're worthless." And I do want to point out the pinned comment. It says, "These clips always bring the beta males to the comments. Get a job."
Okay, Roseanne Barr.
And I don't know if Mark Driscoll himself runs his YouTube channel. I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, he probably has somebody that takes care of all of that.
Yeah.
But still, whoever's doing it is representing Pastor Mark Driscoll, the brand.
Yeah.
Who's representing him as a person.
Who's just straight up using alt-right talking points.
Yeah. So it's like, these titles do accurately depict what Driscoll thinks.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this clip. It's only 6 minutes long, so this video probably won't be super long.
So Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to what? To work. You're not a man if you don't work. You're not a man if you don't work. God made men to work. God didn't make men to vote for other men to tax men who do work so they don't have to work. God made men to work. This is before sin enters the world and before the curse. This is the perfect...
No, it's not. That's not true. The curse of the man is that he has to work the ground.
He'll get to that.
Okay.
He'll kind of address it. But I've
never heard anyone besides him ever say that men were put here to work before the curse.
You'll see how he kind of justifies that.
Perfect world before sin enters in. You and I are made to work.
I do, because he had on screen a couple of different verses, but I noticed that he didn't include the verses in full. And so I was just kind of curious what those verses say. So the first one was Genesis 1:28. It says, "God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground.'" The second one was Genesis 2:15. "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it." On the screen, Driscoll just went, had a ... after work. So he's
Okay.
using that verse specifically to kind of back up the idea that God designed us to work, because when we were put in the Garden of Eden, we were supposed to cultivate the land.
Okay.
And then the third verses that he had was Genesis 3:17 through 19. To Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, from dust you are, and to dust you will return. So he's using all three of these verses to back up the idea that we're designed to work, but really only one of those verses could really be like interpreted that way.
Yeah.
And it was specifically about working and cultivating the garden in Eden, not really about just like work in general.
Yeah.
And then the first verse was more about the fact that God gave humans dominion over the earth, over the other animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was about the fall of man and how because of man's sin, now our work is going to be hard and difficult and cursed.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I feel like he kind of just cherry picked these verses and they don't even really back up what he's saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I've never heard a theologian ever make the case that he's making before. And as far as I know, the way that you portrayed this issue is accurate. I've never heard anyone say that, God intended for us to slave and toil and work and all these kinds of things before the curse. The curse was the thing that made toil and work a necessity. Before then, you were just living in harmony with the garden.
Right.
That's what I've heard everyone else say.
Yeah.
This is why the Protestant work ethic, it said that we are to work, so people worked. And this is why Protestants started giving our children, but especially our sons, chores. As early as possible, you need to learn how to work. And by giving even a child chores, we're giving them responsibility. We're teaching them the value of work, and we're preparing them to work. In addition, then, our work now is cursed. Genesis 3 after.
So my question here is, does he really believe that only Protestants give their children chores?
Yeah.
Because that's just obviously not true.
Right.
And I think that giving children chores is a good thing. I think it does teach them responsibility and it prepares them for adulthood. But I think that we can observe how giving children chores prepares them for the real world.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily need to bring theology into that because it's observable.
Yeah. I definitely don't think that Protestants invented giving children work. I think it's pretty easy to see throughout history people have had children and children have been put to work on the land or in the area that the people live in.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, they're grown up enough to either depart from the home or be a part of the home and continue to work the same land. I think in agricultural society, children have worked. And one of the benefits of having many children in agricultural societies is that you get a lot of people that can work your land.
Mm-hmm.
And that's before Protestantism ever existed. I mean, Protestantism happened when many civilizations were starting to transition beyond just agricultural, and we were just maybe a couple hundred years away from the Industrial Revolution. So, yeah, I think kids worked before Protestantism.
Yeah. I think it's also worth mentioning that the Protestant work ethic has been criticized because it places a lot of emphasis on productivity,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of values people for the work that they can produce rather than for just being a human being.
Yeah.
And I think that this is exactly what Driscoll is doing here, because this whole video is to make the point that if you're not at work, especially if you're a man, that there is something wrong with you. Like, your worth is tied to you working and your productivity. He's doing exactly that. And I would imagine that how he gives chores and work to his children is probably a lot more aggressive and overboard than what is typical, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think that he sees people who aren't, part of his religious ilk as being like softies or not really parenting their children because they might use a softer approach or just give appropriate amount of work to their children. And he just thinks everyone needs to be working all the time or else you're shitty.
This is an ideology that is lifted from post-industrial societies, like industrial revolution and onward type of culture, where you have to work, you have to produce. Christianity historically has derived human worth from the fact that we're all apparently made in the image of God, not that we produce something.
Yeah.
It's just kind of funny to see him tie his theology so closely with a certain type of capitalism, basically.
Yeah, and that really is his theology.
Yeah.
Like, his theology is capitalism and like being a Republican and his personal opinions. Like, he really can morph biblical passages into reflect or saying what he wants them to say. Like, it's not really based in any like historical theology, honestly.
Sin enters the world. He came to Adam, God did, and he said, "Cursed is the ground because of you. The man is not cursed, but the ground is. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth. By the sweat of your face you shall eat." So God works. God made us as men to work, and once we sin, now our work is cursed. And what this means is, just as we rebel against God, everything that we're supposed to have dominion over is now rebelling against us. So as we have rebelled against God, now everything is rebelling against us. True or false now, work is harder than it was before the curse. Here's what it means. Everything you do is going to constantly be in a state of trying to undo everything you're trying to do. Everything's going to, true or false, take longer because something's going to go wrong. It's going to cost more because something's going to go wrong. It's going to require more time and energy and effort because the work is now cursed. And as men, we need to accept that. And
so that's how he justifies the idea that we've always been meant to work, but now it's just harder.
Yeah,
right?
now it's just harder. And he thinks that God's original intention for us wasn't to work as hard as we have to now. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I would push back on about that is that, I mean, God, since he's all-knowing, he knew that we were going to sin.
Yeah.
And that we were going to mess things up. But yet he made us anyway. And so it's like, he did kind of intend for that to happen.
Yeah, why not just cut to the chase?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. That you could argue that this has been God's design for us to have to slave away all day.
Yeah.
Because he knew that was going to happen before he created us.
Yeah.
And I do think that he's right. Sometimes work is hard. Sometimes it is difficult. But I don't think that we have to conclude that it's hard because of some sort of curse. I think that there's observable reasons for why work is sometimes hard.
Yeah.
I don't think that we have to engage in magical thinking. But also, sometimes work isn't hard. So if like there is this curse apparently on mankind, then wouldn't it be the case that anytime anyone worked, it's always difficult and it's always, grueling? Or
that it can't be made easier, I mean, we make our work a lot easier with technology. Building a car in 1917 was really, really difficult and took hundreds or thousands of people in a giant assembly line. And now, I mean, it's mostly robotic arms that build cars according to computer specifications that like a few people have worked on, right? So, are we overcoming the power of God by?
I mean, if there's some sort of curse on us, then shouldn't that be impossible for us to do?
You would think so, but I don't know how the magical system works. I haven't studied the deep magic well enough to know.
I mean, I've had jobs that have been hard, but I've also had jobs that have been super easy. Like, I'm thinking back to my job at the airlines. Like, sometimes when stuff was really slow, I'd literally sit there and binge Netflix for hours and eat snacks. I definitely didn't think that my job was cursed or my work was cursed then.
You're not a man, so it doesn't count.
Well, I thought it was on all humans, not just men. I just think that if you can find even one example of a job that's not difficult at all, it is super easy, then his entire line of thinking falls apart. Because, again, if there's a curse, then it has to be a curse at all times, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if it's the all-powerful force of the creator of the universe, then you would think that there could be no exceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens is people who don't understand work and the curse, they think that it should be easy, so they show up to work and they're like, this is so hard. Yes, your job is cursed. You're going to have to exert more time and effort and energy to accomplish your tasks. This is why people who don't understand that we live in a cursed and fallen world, they expect work to be a lot easier. How many of you are employers? And you hire somebody and 15 minutes into the job, they quit and they're like, oh, this is really hard. You're like, yeah, that's why we pay you. We don't pay people to do things that are fun. Like nobody ever got paid to take a nap. You just do that for free. We incentivize you with money because it's going to be hard. If you're a young man, you need to know this. It doesn't matter what job you take, what career you pursue, it is going to fight you every single day. There is no easy job. There's no easy career. There's no easy path. And as a man, you just accept that. You're like, you know what? It's going to take some work, and I'm going to have to put in some energy. Well,
so you notice how at the end there, he kind of like is directing this whole spiel at young men specifically. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because he has this very like boomer mentality that all young folks are just lazy and nobody wants to work these days.
Right.
Which I don't think is true. I mean, I think that there are lazy people, sure, but I think there's lazy people in any generation.
Yeah.
I do think that younger people are more likely to quit jobs when they realize that the amount of work they're putting in is not worth the money.
Yeah.
Because as we've seen, minimum wage has not kept up with
inflation.
Yeah. While people that are older might tend to like stick it out at jobs that are not necessarily worth it because they see like an inherent good in just working hard regardless of how much they're getting paid.
Yeah.
So like maybe I'll give him that, but I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, the message that he's giving here is, I think, very convenient for the employers that he's speaking to out there, because it allows them to rationalize paying people less or, being justified when other people quit. Like I shouldn't as an employer have to make the deal better, sweeten the deal to get people to work. I can now just use Mark Driscoll's theology in order to justify my self-importance, my idea that, well, the reason why people don't want to work for me is because I'm actually better than other people, and that other people are lazy and kind of inferior. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm having trouble keeping my employees, not because I actually have a shortcoming in that I'm not paying people a fair wage.
Right. Yeah.
So, you could hear this and not take it that way, but I think that it's pretty easy to take it that way when you hear something like this, for sure.
What this means is, well, any of you men who are looking for a shortcut, an easy path, it's a mirage in the desert. It's a dead end. How many of you tried a job? You're like, it's really hard. So I tried another job. It's really hard. All the jobs are hard. All the jobs are hard. There is no shortcut. You're going to have to push. You're going to have to sweat. You're going to have to put in the time.
I would definitely push back on the idea that there's no shortcut and there's no easy path. At least within the system that we have right now, there is an easy path and a shortcut, and it's greed, lying, and scam artistry.
Yeah, or just being born into wealth.
Yeah. It's the best ways, I think, to acquire wealth within the system that we have are to be born into it and then to lie, cheat, and steal as much as you possibly can, specifically from people of a lower socioeconomic status with less power than you. So someone who has the capital to upstart a drop shipping scam will become, multimillionaires a lot of the time. And that's not hard work. It's a result of unearned privilege plus the willingness to compromise morally. But of course, Mark Driscoll thinks basically capitalism is part of God's plan.
I do think this is kind of rich coming from Mark Driscoll, because it seems like to me, he was able to build up his wealth pretty easily. Like, Mars Hill was the first church that he founded, as far as I know, and it was pretty successful early on, and he built an entire empire based on that.
Yeah.
So I think, it's a little bit ironic just coming from him, because it's like, you've had it pretty easy too.
Yeah. He talks about how hard you have to work in order to be successful, which implies that he's worked really hard. But statistically speaking, as far as I can tell, the people who do the most work hours for the smallest amount of compensation in the US typically are Hispanic women. Mm-hmm. And especially who are undocumented. Mm-hmm. And those would be the people that he thinks are looking for a free ride and are lazy and awful, and they, they need to be punished in such and such way. I would love to see him do a little Freaky Friday with somebody who's living in Southern Arizona that's like providing for her children and doing all the things that you have to do in that position.
And I think fundamentally he doesn't see that type of work, because that would involve a lot of taking care of the children and taking care of the home,
right?
As well as probably having jobs. He doesn't see that as work.
Yeah.
And you can, obviously by the title of this video, stay-at-home dads are total clowns. He doesn't think being a stay-at-home dad and looking after the children is work.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's more than a job. Like, at least at 9 to 5s, when it's 5 o'clock, you get to clock out and go home. With taking care of children, there is no stopping.
Yeah. My job now, as a full-time YouTuber for the past 5 years, is a lot more like Mark Driscoll's job. I research a lot. I don't know if he does, but I read things, I write things, and I speak. Mm-hmm. And that's, basically what I do. That's what he does. My job, being in social work, working at behavioral hospitals, working at group homes, working at homeless shelters, was a lot harder than what I'm doing right now. And that was taking care of children primarily. Yeah.
That's very hard.
Yeah,
work.
It's extremely difficult.
Extremely tiring.
And it was fulfilling work, but I definitely am glad. For my own sake, for my own health, physical and mental, I'm in a lot better position now, in an easier position of being a YouTuber.
Yeah.
And the example of this for us men is who? It's Jesus. What's amazing for us, this is the benefit for us. We're men, and we worship Jesus Christ, who is a man, so he shows us exactly what a man is supposed to be and do. And Jesus worked. So it says in John 5:17-36, Jesus answered them, my Father is working. Even in the Godhead, fathers and sons work. This is where one of the best things you can do is teach your sons how to work, and sometimes take them to work with you. My dad took me to the job site when he was hanging drywall, and I was growing up. I got to see my dad work.
He really loves to tell the story of watching his dad do drywall.
Yeah.
I've heard him say that exact thing several times.
It's really interesting to bring up Jesus as an example of someone who worked, given that he was a transient beggar. He was like, have no possessions, don't have a job, just give up everything and follow me. In the context of the time, when you are a prophet, a speaker, a spiritual leader that is like Jesus, then you would bounce from person's house to person's house. You would rely on other people for your food, your clothing, your housing. He worked in giving speeches and things like that. And that's real work for sure. But I would think that Mark Driscoll would be against people receiving handouts like Jesus did.
Oh yeah, he definitely would be. But just wait, because you'll see what he says next. Because he's like, well, that was only in the last 3 years of Jesus's life.
My grandpa was a diesel mechanic. I got to see him turn wrenches. I saw the men in my family work. Jesus says, my Father is working until now, and I am working. The works that the Father has given me to accomplish are the very works that I am doing. So Jesus' whole life, he's working. When he's a little boy and he's got chores, he's working. He grew up in a peasant rural family. He had work to do as a kid. And then he grew up working with his dad, who was a carpenter.
And he did that before Protestantism existed.
Jesus spent 90% of his life working a job. He spent the last 3 years preaching, teaching, healing, but that was 3 years. The previous 30 years, he was just going to work with his dad.
Source?
Yeah. Okay, this is exactly, yeah. Let's get into it. The Bible really has very little to say about Jesus' early life and childhood.
Yeah.
So to so confidently say Jesus was working 90% of the time when he was growing up is just something that he pulled out of his ass.
Yeah.
He doesn't know that.
Yeah, there's not scripture to back that up.
Yeah, and there is a Bible story about Jesus as a child. He went somewhere with his parents and he ran away from them and they couldn't find him for 3 days.
Yeah.
And when they finally found him, he was in the temple with all the other teachers, talking with them, and they were like very impressed by how much wisdom and how much he knew. Like, obviously they were, not working in the very narrow sense that Driscoll thinks work is. They were teaching and learning. So there's that one story. There's not much else there's nothing specifically about Jesus working. Was his dad a carpenter? Yes. Did he learn carpentry? Yeah. But to say like, oh, that's all he did until, he started his ministry is like total bullshit.
Yeah. You know what? There actually is a source. There is a Christian literary source for Jesus working directly with Joseph on a wooden structure. And that is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. In it, at one point, Joseph and Jesus are working on something, and they don't have the correct length of wood. It's too short. And Joseph is like, oh no, there's a deadline. I'm screwed because I'm working on this for a very rich person who will give me consequences. And Jesus basically is like, Dad, take this part of the wood and hold on to it. And then Jesus gets the other part and like stretches it and makes the wood the correct length. And it's a miracle, right? You're supposed to think a lot of Jesus and how magical he is from hearing that. In the same book, though, he goes to school and teachers keep telling him, hey, I need you to say your ABCs. I mean, literally, you need to say your ABCs. And Jesus is like, either talks back to them and then does something to them, or just is like, and kills them with a touch. They shrivel up like a raisin and die. I have a whole video about this. And he strikes adults blind. He does all these crazy antics that you would expect a 5 to 8-year-old boy to do if he had omniscience or omnipotence, right? But I don't think that Mark Driscoll would particularly appreciate the Infancy Gospel of Thomas because it's non-canonical.
Well, it sounds like Jesus was very rebellious and very like disrespectful of authority, and that does not go along with Driscoll's whole worldview, because he's all about authority.
Definitely.
With him as the authority at the top.
Right.
And he was obedient as a carpenter and also as a minister. And it is so wonderful, because what we have is a God who was being worshiped by angels in heaven, came down and got a job. He got a job. So guys are like, I want to be like Jesus, then get a freaking job. Then get a freaking job and go to work. The guys who sit home all day and they're like, I just want to read my Bible and pray all day and pontificate. No, that's the Greek life. That's the non-Christian Greek life. That's not the Protestant work ethic. That's not the example of Jesus.
What? That's literally what Mark Driscoll does.
Oh my God.
That's literally what he does.
Yeah.
He's a pastor.
Yeah.
He reads the Bible and I'm sure other biblical texts, and he gets on stage and pontificates. That's his entire job. But apparently, for everyone else, that's not okay.
Even Jesus.
I
mean, in that verse from John that he quoted, Jesus is saying within his 3-year ministry, even now, I am working, right? If you want to take it as work, whatever. If I'm charitable with that, you still have to say, Jesus is saying, by pontificating, I am working. By speaking, I'm working. What the hell, man? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
No sense. And also, Driscoll founded Mars Hill in his really early 20s. So he's been doing this job of pontificating and reading for decades. Like, I'm sure he had other jobs growing up, but this is what he's been doing. But apparently, it's not okay when other people do it. But when he does it, he's an exception.
I will say he does appreciate men as much as the Greeks stereotypically did, it seems.
God, he loves men. He loves talking about men.
We're usually fine with anybody, liking men. That's something that we don't think should be stigmatized. But in Mark Driscoll's case, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say that's a little hypocritical there, buddy. You're allowed to like men and nobody else.
So something that a lot of people have noticed about Driscoll is that he really likes to cosplay as this blue-collar worker. Because you can tell just from his appearance. He's wearing jeans, he'll wear boots, he'll wear cowboy hats or just other hats. And he likes to come off as like, I'm rough and tumble, I work hard with my hands, I'm just like all of you in the audience.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's never really had a job like that, at least not a career based on a job like that. He's just portraying himself that way so that he can kind of relate more to his audience. Yeah, I wrote down in my notes that I think that this is purposeful. He wants to appear relatable to his audience and come off as one of them or as a simple, hardworking country boy while securing his position of power and benefiting off of the work of his congregation that actually does do that kind of jobs. He demeans people who read, learn, and think for themselves because he doesn't want his congregation to be educated or actually think and analyze what he's saying, because that would be a threat to his power.
Exactly. I feel like Mark Driscoll is the Christian man equivalent of Kim Kardashian saying, no one wants to fucking work anymore.
Yeah, no.
I mean,
He totally is.
He's rich. He sits around pontificating all day, and then he judges other people. What?
Some of you guys, you young guys need to know this. You were made to work. And if you don't work, you're a problem. And God hasn't created you to just sit around and pontificate and theologize and speculate, but to get some things done.
But that's what you do.
Man, he even put
You
theologize
sit around,
in there.
Yeah, like you literally theologize.
Yeah.
So why is it okay for you to do that, but not for anybody else? Do you
are-
not want anyone else to become a pastor and potentially take your position away from you?
Competition. Yeah. No, I totally think that you're 100% correct in that. He's constantly trying to ward off threats to his supremacy, to his power. It's
so obvious.
Yeah, it's so
too.
transparent.
I don't know how people in his audience do not see that.
It's really funny, as, you know, a guy who grew up in a culture that was somewhat like Mark Driscoll's, being personally smaller and more effeminate than most guys. It definitely was my experience that men who constantly pushed others and pushed themselves to be really macho and constantly proving their masculinity, those are some of the most insecure people that I ever knew. Some of the people who were the most secure were the people who cared the least about fulfilling really, really specific stereotypes. And I guess because this macho image also comes along with the physical power to intimidate someone, I mean physically intimidate someone, I guess they think that they don't come off as ragingly insecure, but they do to anyone who pontificates for more than 30 seconds, right?
Yeah. And Driscoll is a very, very insecure person.
Yeah.
And he's also a narcissist.
Yeah, narcissists usually are.
That comes with narcissism. And we've said this before in our videos about him, and I've gotten comments from people accusing me of ad hominem attacking him by saying that, but that is pretty well substantiated. And if you guys want to learn more about basically the cult of Mark Driscoll, then I highly suggest watching the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. They go over a lot of things in detail, and there's a lot of information in that really points to him being a narcissist. So I'm not just saying that just because that's my opinion, or like that's just like what I'm getting from this 6-minute clip.
Yeah.
It's because I've done research, and that's how I know.
Yeah.
And Jesus is your example. He did know the Bible, he did study, he did pray, but he went to work every single day. And so for us to be men of God, we have got to work, and we work for Jesus. Howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.
Look at that cosplay at the end. He had like the Carhartt jacket. It looks like he just got off of a construction site job, you know?
I mean, why would he have to wear that? You're just sitting in your church office reading and pontificating all day.
Yeah.
But notice how he didn't ever actually refer to stay-at-home dads.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, myself included, think that he's clickbaiting a lot of his titles. Because a lot of them, I've watched some other ones that are very much like this, where he doesn't really talk about the topic. He kind of talks around it. But I do think he does think that.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that he thinks stay-at-home dads are clowns.
Right.
And yeah, like we talked about earlier, he doesn't think that taking care of the home and the children is real work, and he sees that as less respectable and really as women's work.
So sad for women who are in his orbit.
I know.
They're
I can't imagine.
obviously not appreciated, and being unappreciated is probably the least bad thing that they are in this situation, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine that there are that many healthy relationships where women are respected by their husbands in the church that he's leading.
I would think probably not. And any video that I've seen where him and his wife are interacting has been like super awkward and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like he's constantly like poking fun at her.
She makes a point, he has to go like, oh, well, hold on, don't get ahead of us. Or leave that to me.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super awkward. There was a comment on this video that I want to read because it made me super, super sad. It said, I'm a retired military man. I stay at home and homeschool our 2 girls. I contribute to our church and our community, and I'm trying to get a side hustle online. My wife, who is highly educated, works away from the home. It's the only way we can financially make it work. This title is clickbait. His message didn't line up with the title.
Wow.
I think that's just so sad because this guy was in the military. He's homeschooling his kids.
All the good Christian stuff,
He's
right?
contributing to his church and his community and doing a side hustle, but apparently that's not good enough. Mark Driscoll would still consider that man to be worthless and a joke, you know? I just think that's so sad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, calling loving and taking care of your children directly something that makes you worthless is directly promoting being kind of an absent father, at least emotionally, right? I mean, that's how I would see that. And he likes to talk about how we have an absent father problem in the US and worldwide. I think this creates a new kind of absent father problem. You know, like men are supposed to be distant, men are not supposed to do women's work, which includes nurturing behaviors.
Yeah.
It's gross and will raise a generation of kids who don't know the love and direct care and nurture of their dads.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that our dads were not like this. I mean, neither one of our dads worked in the home. Neither one of them. I mean, my dad traveled constantly.
But they're still very present.
Yeah, constantly present, constantly nurturing, and didn't belittle our moms either for staying at home.
No, not at all.
If you were to make a clickbait title for our video responding to him, what would it be?
Mark Driscoll is a clown and God doesn't take him seriously. Please don't forget to check out the sponsor of today's video, Scentbird, and use my code ANTIBOT for 55% off. Thank you so much for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my Instagram is Taylor_the_antibot, and if you'd like to help out this channel financially, a link to my Patreon will be down in the description, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!